ever wished you could unlock a time capsule? Not just of, like, objects and stuff, but of someone's actual life.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's what we're doing today.
Oh, wow.
We've got History of Steve Cantlow, a memoir.
Okay.
And it was just written recently, actually, on October 4th, 2024. So really fresh, really new perspective.
Interesting.
And we're going to use it to take a deep dive into the life of just a regular, ordinary Londoner.
Okay.
He was born in 1959. And we're going to see, what we can uncover, what hidden gems about life in the 20th century.
It's amazing, when we get these kind of personal stories, how it really helps us to, like, grasp what it was really like back then. Everyday life in a bygone era. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Because you can read, like, the history books, but it's different when you're seeing it through someone's, like, everyday experience.
Totally. It's like stepping into a time machine. So our man Steve, he grows up in London, right? But it's still rebuilding from World War II, right?
Right.
His dad was a policeman.
Oh, wow.
And his mom was a nurse.
Interesting.
Which is just so, like, those classic figures of, like, stability.
Right.
In uncertain times.
Yeah.
What do you make of that choice, though, of, like, those professions kind of against that backdrop of, London still kind of, rebuilding after the war?
Yeah, that's fascinating, isn't it?
Yeah.
It kind of speaks to that need, that yearning for, like, order, security, especially after all those years of upheaval and chaos and everything. Police officers and nurses, they represent that. They're like the bedrock.
Yeah.
A society trying to heal and find its footing again.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, we have little Steve running around in the thick of it all, playing in, he was in those communal courtyards of Oxley Court.
Okay.
So you can just imagine the echoes of those years. I mean, he would have been there for, like, the solemnity of Churchill's funeral in 1965,
Wow.
the national grief
Yeah.
that everyone was feeling. And then on the other side of things, the pure joy of his first football match, QPR versus Gillingham,
Okay.
which was March 25th, 1967, for anyone keeping track.
Right.
I mean, what a mix of emotions, right? For,
Yeah.
like, a young boy to be experiencing all of that at once.
And it just shows how those big historical events, they kind of intersect with our own personal stories.
Yeah.
So, like, for Steve, that event, Churchill's funeral, it's probably just kind of a hazy memory, like, for a child.
Right. But that first football match, that's vivid, exciting, like, it's really stuck with him. I mean, that just speaks to, like, how powerful personal experience can be.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of vivid memories, Steve actually tells this, like, hilarious story about almost like taking out a motorist with his runaway tricycle.
Oh, no.
You just got to wonder what was going through that driver's mind as this, like, little boy comes barreling at them on his tricycle.
Oh, I'm sure they were terrified.
I know, right?
But you're right. It's those little details, the small things that really bring history to life.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
They remind us that even with all the big societal changes and the global events and everything that was happening, like, life still goes on.
Mm-hmm.
And it's still filled with those everyday joys and, mishaps.
And those funny moments of, like, childhood mischief.
Exactly. And for Steve, childhood unfolded alongside some really massive, like, cultural moments,
Oh, yeah.
Like, picture this, right? He's huddled around the telly with his whole family.
Okay.
That glow of the black and white screen, right?
Yeah.
Illuminating everyone's faces. And they're watching the moon landing.
Wow.
Can you imagine being a kid then and seeing that, like, impossible dream become reality?
I can't even imagine. It's hard to really overstate the impact of that event.
Right?
And not just on, technology, but on everyone. Like, the collective human psyche.
Yeah.
Like, all of a sudden, anything seemed achievable. Like, the future was wide
It
open.
must have felt that way.
Yeah, it was a huge, like, watershed moment for a generation.
Totally. And speaking of watershed moments, what about that shift from black and white to color television?
Oh, yeah.
Steve talks about, like, specifically the thrill of watching Blue Peter and Star Trek in color
Wow.
for the first time
I bet.
after only ever seeing them in, like, shades of gray.
It's like, it totally changed how we experience, like, information and entertainment, right?
Yeah.
It's like a whole new dimension was added to watching TV.
Totally.
It's so hard for us to imagine now,
No, right?
Like, everything we watch, every screen is in color.
everything.
But back then, it was revolutionary.
It's like going from, like, a flip phone to a smartphone. Like, can you imagine going back?
No, not
And
me.
Steve's right there, witnessing it all, soaking it up.
Oh,
He even saw the 1970 FA Cup final, which was a real nail-biter between Leeds and Chelsea.
oh, wow.
He seems to have been there for, like, all of these, like, iconic moments.
He really does, yeah. And just for anyone that doesn't know, the FA Cup final, it's like, the Super Bowl of football in England.
Oh.
Like the energy, the passion, it's incredible.
Wow.
A real spectacle.
So we've got Steve growing up amidst this backdrop of, like, cultural shifts, technological advancements,
Right.
and the occasional, runaway tricycle.
Exactly.
But as he's navigating those, kind of formative years, music becomes, like, his constant companion.
Of course. I mean, music has this amazing power to capture, like, the feeling of the time.
Totally.
Wouldn't you say?
100%.
It's a reflection of the times. It's like a soundtrack to our lives.
Yeah. And for Steve, that soundtrack begins with the Beatles.
Ah, the Beatles.
Of course.
Such a cultural phenomenon. They were like a symbol of like youthful rebellion and optimism in a world that was like, really on the brink of change.
And from the Fab Four, Steve's musical journey takes him straight into the arms of, like, the king himself, Elvis Presley.
Elvis.
Imagine being like a teenager in the 70s.
Yeah.
And discovering Elvis.
Right.
That raw energy, the rebellious spirit.
Absolutely. And Elvis really did represent that, like, break from tradition,
Good point.
a challenge to what everyone expected,
Yeah.
which really resonated with young people back then.
Yeah.
It wasn't just the music. It was like this whole cultural movement.
It's like that moment, when you find music that, like, truly speaks to you. You know what I mean? It becomes like the soundtrack to your own, like, coming-of-age story.
Totally.
But with Steve, it doesn't stop there.
Okay.
Because as punk rock explodes onto the scene, he's right there.
Oh, wow.
Like, caught up in the mosh pit of change.
So he went from, like, the Beatles to Elvis to punk.
It's quite a journey, right?
Yeah.
What do you think drew him to punk, especially after Elvis?
Maybe it was the, like, raw honesty,
Yeah.
that unfiltered emotion that punk offered.
Yeah.
I mean, the 70s were a pretty turbulent time.
Right.
Economic uncertainty, social unrest, all of that.
Yeah.
And punk kind of provided this outlet for all of that.
Yeah.
All that frustration and disillusionment.
It's like that feeling when the music just reflects the, like, chaos of the world around you. Right?
Absolutely.
And Steve doesn't shy away from chaos, especially in his personal life. Like, he gets married kind of young, becomes a father for the first time.
Oh, wow.
To a son, James, in 1979.
Okay.
But even as he's, like, starting a family, he's also wrestling with, like, some regret.
Oh, really?
Especially about his relationship with James. Like, he carries this guilt about, not being the father he could have been.
It's just a really poignant reminder that life doesn't always go, like, according to plan,
Right.
Parenthood, it comes with its own set of challenges.
It does.
And sometimes we stumble along the way.
Right.
And, Steve's honesty about those shortcomings, it really speaks to, like, his capacity for, really looking at himself.
Yeah. And that self-reflection, kind of leads him on this quest for, like, I don't know, something more,
Okay.
He goes from working on the railway, which I bet had its own set of adventures.
Oh, sure did.
To enrolling in Bible school.
Wow.
That's quite a leap.
It is.
Yeah.
What do you think sparked that?
I don't know. What do you think?
Perhaps it was that, like, that search for meaning.
Okay.
Like a deeper sense of purpose. The railway kind of represents this, like, tangible physical world, right?
Yeah.
While Bible school speaks to something, like, more intangible, spiritual, you know what I mean?
Right.
It's a fascinating kind of, like, dichotomy.
It is. And it's at Bible school where he meets Tracy.
Okay.
Who would become his first wife.
Oh, wow.
He describes her in such vivid detail. Especially her, and I quote, cutest lips in the history of lips.
Oh.
You can just feel this, like, the butterflies.
Love has a way of, like, sweeping us off our feet.
It really does.
Especially when we least expect it.
Yeah.
And for Steve, it seems like, this new love kind of coincided with this, like, period of, like, intense personal exploration.
Yeah. They get married in '83, and then in the thick of a snowstorm, on January 7th, 1985, Gemma is born. Can you imagine?
Oh, wow.
Bringing a new life into the world.
Yeah.
In the middle of a blizzard.
Yeah.
talk about a dramatic entrance.
It's almost symbolic, isn't it?
It is.
This new life begin amidst all this, like, change and unpredictability. And maybe that kind of reflects Steve's own life at the time, right?
Yeah. like life is mirroring art. But as with any, good story,
Yeah.
there are twists and turns.
Yeah, of course.
And Steve and Tracy's relationship hits a rough patch.
Oh.
And he finds himself kind of, like, drawn to someone new. Eileen, who he describes as a blonde-haired goth.
Oh.
That kind of piques my interest.
It speaks to the complexities of, how humans connect.
He does.
We're constantly evolving, right?
Right.
And sometimes those evolutions, they lead us on different paths, even if it means parting with someone we once loved.
It's true. Sometimes, love isn't a straight line. It's more like a winding road.
Totally.
But even as he's navigating these, personal challenges, Steve never lets go of his ambitions. Remember how he always wanted to be an actor?
Oh, right. Yeah.
Dreams have a way of, sticking with us.
They do.
Even when life takes us in unexpected directions.
For sure.
And for Steve, those acting dreams, they kind of manifest in amateur dramatics.
Okay.
He was even auditioning for, prestigious drama schools like RA.
Wow.
It's like he's drawn to the stage, to storytelling in all its forms.
It's like that need to, explore different perspectives, to embody different characters.
Right.
Maybe that's what appeals to him.
Maybe. And let's not forget his musical pursuits. He forms a band.
Oh, wow.
They play a few gigs.
Cool.
He even does a punk version of Blue Suede Shoes.
Oh, really?
Imagine that.
Wow.
Elvis reimagined through a punk rock lens.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
It really speaks to his willingness to just go for it, Yeah. To blend genres and kind of push boundaries.
Yeah.
He's not afraid to take risks and try new things.
Absolutely. But his story isn't just about, personal triumphs and heartbreaks.
Okay.
He's also really aware of these societal changes, kind of swirling around him.
Right.
He talks about the decline of the high street.
Yeah.
That slow fade of bustling shopping areas.
Right.
Being replaced by online shopping and all that.
It's really changed things, hasn't it?
Yeah.
It makes you think about, how we consume things,
Right.
the convenience of online shopping versus, that experience of actually going to a store,
Right.
Browsing in a physical store, we're losing something.
Yeah.
It's sad, really, that sense of community, that human interaction.
It is. It is a loss. But like you said, it's about change, right?
Right.
And Skate seems to, get that.
Yeah.
He doesn't just, complain about it.
Right.
He chronicles it. You know what I mean? He
Yeah.
observes it.
Yeah.
With this keen eye.
Yeah.
And it's not just the high street. It's, everything.
Oh, yeah.
From, decimalization, which for those who don't know is this huge shift in, the UK's currency back in 71.
Oh, right.
To, the rise of the internet, which is this, invisible force.
Yeah.
That's, changing how we, connect and communicate.
It was just this time of, rapid technological advancement.
Yeah.
And Steve's life is, this fascinating, microcosm of all those changes.
Yeah. And through it all, he's not just observing.
Right.
He's, experiencing these monumental shifts
Yeah.
on a personal level.
Yeah.
And just when you think you've got a handle on his story, another curveball.
Oh, no. What now?
Remember Eileen, the blonde goth?
Yeah.
Well, as his marriage with Tracy continues to, crumble,
Right.
he makes a, life-altering decision.
Oh.
So he leaves Tracy.
Wow.
He packs his bags, and he heads north to the ancient city of York with Eileen.
It's a big move,
Yeah.
to leave everything you know behind.
Yeah.
For something new, for someone new.
And it's like he's trusting that love's gonna, guide the way.
It's kind of romantic when you think about it like that.
It is kind of romantic. And Steve seems to, thrive on that sense of adventure. Not only does he move to a new city, but he also enrolls at the University of Leeds.
Oh, wow.
Remember how he always wanted to, learn,
Yeah.
expand his horizons and everything?
Yeah.
And here he is, in his 40s, diving headfirst into, academia.
That's amazing.
Studying history and media.
Yeah.
What a testament to, lifelong learning.
It shows you it's never too late.
Never too late. But, as we've seen with Steve, life has a way of, throwing these curveballs.
It does.
When you least expect it.
Yeah.
Because his relationship with Eileen eventually kind of,
Fades.
it fades, yeah.
It happens.
And he finds himself, navigating those choppy waters of heartbreak.
Love. It's not always a smooth journey,
No.
even when you really want it to be.
It's that bittersweet reality of life, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But even when he's hurting, Steve keeps moving forward.
Different.
He meets Samantha. And in 1998, they get married.
Okay.
And he becomes a stepdad to Rebecca.
Wow. So he's navigating that whole blended family thing.
He is.
Yeah.
What do you think that, chapter, reveals about him?
Mm-hmm.
Especially after all those previous relationships,
I think it shows just how much he's capable of loving,
Oh.
and how committed he is to building a family.
Right.
And blended families, they can be tough.
Totally.
They require a lot of patience,
Yeah.
understanding, that willingness to embrace this different kind of family structure.
Yeah.
And it sounds like that's what he wanted, to create a home.
And he does. Because not long after marrying Samantha, they have 2 more kids, Simon and Rachel.
Back to back.
I know, back to back. He's a father of 5 now.
Life has a way of doing that, expanding our hearts.
It really does.
In ways you never thought possible.
And it's beautiful, But like any family, they had their, their struggles.
Of course.
And his marriage to Samantha, it doesn't last.
Oh.
And he's really open, really honest about how painful that was.
Yeah.
That separation.
Yeah.
The impact on him, but also the impact on the kids.
Divorce is so tough.
It is.
Especially when children are involved.
Yeah.
It said a lot about him that he can, acknowledge that.
Yeah.
The pain, how hard it was.
Yeah.
And that he doesn't try to shy away from that.
It shows real strength to be so open about, the mistakes.
Totally.
And everything. And it's actually during this time, this really tough time in his life, that he kind of finds, solace in his faith.
Okay.
He converts to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in 2002.
Okay.
It's like, this spiritual awakening.
Yeah.
Kind of coinciding with this period of, really deep reflection.
It makes sense,
Right.
When people are going through something really difficult, it's not uncommon for them to turn to faith.
Right.
Sometimes it can be, a source of strength
Mm-hmm.
when you need it the most.
And Steve definitely needed that strength.
Why is that?
Because shortly after joining the church, he has a heart attack.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah. It's a scary reminder of how fragile life is.
Right.
How time is precious.
It makes you stop and think, doesn't it?
It does.
About what really matters.
Yeah.
How you really want to spend your time.
It's a real wake-up call.
Yeah.
And Steve seems to come out of that experience with this renewed purpose.
Yeah.
Because in 2005, he meets Sarah.
Okay.
And she becomes his wife.
Huh.
And he describes their wedding day as pure joy.
Oh, how lovely.
Like he could finally relax.
Yeah.
Enjoy it.
After so many years of, ups and downs.
Yeah, after all those tumultuous years, it's like he finally found his, his safe harbor.
It's nice to hear that after everything he'd been through.
It is. And then their happiness grows even more because they have 2 children together, Thomas and Dean.
Wow.
So he's a dad of 6 now.
He's got a big family.
He does. But it's just amazing to see how, through all of it, all the heartache, all the, good times, the world changing around him.
Yeah.
He never loses sight of the important things, of family.
It really is a powerful reminder, isn't it?
Yeah.
That in the end, it's those connections that really matter.
Yeah. And Steve says it best, in his own words.
What does he say?
He says, everyone's story is a mix of triumphs and regrets. And his story, while it's deeply personal, it gives us this, incredible look at how much the world has changed.
It makes you wonder what's going to happen next.
It really does. What will future generations think about us?
Yeah, what will our legacy be?
Right. Something to think about. But for now, we're going to wrap up our deep dive into the life of Steve Cantlow. From those streets of London to, the digital age, his story reminds us that history, it's not just dates on a page.
Right.
It's made up of all these individual stories, these human experiences.
It makes